Having said that, we could make a further distinction with the help of the ex ante and the ex post. And that is that the ex ante intervention, so the prior intervention, is by definition general by nature, because you do not know which market actor you target. So that is the area where general rules, legal rules, are designed and thought through that are applicable to everybody. So there the legislative branch is sort of the stereotype source of these types of rules. And then the ex post clash between reality and juris is always in a specific case. In an event where actually market failure occurred. And then the intervention is targeted at that one individual market actor. Producer of food, owner of a plant that exports, car maker, and so on. So applying thinking you are accustomed to a sort of legal setting, we have a sort of spectrum that starts ex ante with a big group of stakeholders, legislators who try to anticipate on future market failure on the one side, and you try to have a sort of single judge who could rule in an individual case where market failure occurred. And then if you want to design the steering of a state, and both are steering, then these are sort of the bandwidth in between you could play. And you could then think of hybrid civil servants who could try to combine those two aspects of ex ante and ex post in a sort of very efficient way, so that the time lapse between the idea how to avoid market failure and the execution and the implementation and the sanctioning is very short. Because the disadvantage of legislative processes is that it takes very long. And the disadvantage of sort of court cases is that there are specific protecting rules apply for suspects, also corporate suspects, only guilty if proven, or innocent until proven guilty. So that means that also ex post litigation about market failure can be a long, expensive and complicated process with evidence and how do you prove and what is then sort of non-compliance and how do we know that the norm was clear enough and so forth. So basically the two extremes in the design of the steering are regarded in the current society as not the best trick, because innovation, technology, innovations are going so fast that by the time you as a legislator have an idea, oh, this is going on and maybe something happens, and then the market is already 10 years ahead. And then if the adjudicator, so the ex post interventionist, is then sort of developing a sort of opinion on it, that should be based on legal rules, and that's the principle of the rule of law. And then the adjudicator is sort of handicapped because quite often the rules are not existent that apply to the particular market failure that occurred. So the extremes are, in the world of the steering, less favorite, and that is why we continue to think of this topic, because the extremes you already have. So if you simplify history, then thanks to the American and French Revolution, we have sort of separation of power, legislators and judges. So we can do the steering. And the whole idea is that's not good enough to avoid market failure. So there's one. Two, how do these interventions then actually look like? So that we have a closer idea of the design of those rules. And then I developed a sort of distinction between goods, services, and market behavior. And then with goods, you can talk about rules of the design of the goods. So, how do you design a car? Where is the gasoline tank situated with an eye on potential collisions? You can look at the material because it's a tangible thing. You can hold it. So you can have an opinion on the substance, chemical, dynamic sort of qualifications of the material, and you can look at the effect of the good. So if you swallow this banana, do you continue to live or do you die? That is then the effect of the good. Then the next category of services lacks the tangibility. So there the primary concern is the effect. Because there's no material that you can test. There's a service provider, that's a human being. So I didn't want to call the service provider the material which you can test. But are you then testing whether he has a diploma? That's sort of weird theory in my eyes. And so between brackets you could say the design of the service. And so the people who think of, let's say, how a bank account should look like, or medical treatment, how do you do that? You could have a sort of idea on that. But that is in the realm of, let's say, professionalism. And that's in the realm of education of service providers. That's basically what we do in this building, in courses like you are taking. Then last but not least, market behavior, that is ultimately a matter of effects. So market behavior like playing with market mechanism in antitrust behavior. And then you look at the effects, as in that the price of your telephone minutes are too high. Why? Not because of the fair competition rules, but because they agreed secretly to cheat you. Or the consumer protection realm, the area of the market behavior of marketing, that the marketing outings, the information in advertisements is wrong, misleading. There's a certain the powder of rhinoceros horns are good for your love life, according to the label, and that then people start to purchase that powder, where there's no scientific proof at all that there's anything to do with your love life. And as a consequence, you pay far too much for something which is basically something you can produce from your own nails also, after making it powder, and in the course of that ruining natural resources in other part of the world by extinguishing rhinoceroses. So there we look at the effects. Two questions. You were first.
Yeah, so does it, the effects are basically always negative?
Yeah, because we zoom in on market failure.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. The whole idea is market failure, that is what we do not want. And that is where your profession is, to help ex ante to avoid market failure. Because that costs, if you end up in the safety industry of industrial safety industry, and then you have to look at the market failure, and then you look at the negative effects. Good point. Yes, next question.
Could you give another example for the services?
Yes. Well, services is anything not tangible. That is 70% of modern economies. And that is banking, insurance, education, healthcare, transportation, entertainment, so movies, telecommunication, and so forth. Enough examples?
Clear, yes.
And the frustrating part is that yes, there are tangible items involved, like hospitals and cables, but the thing you buy is not the copper cable of the telephone company. You buy the possibility to talk to your friend. So that is something you have to distinguish. So yes, physiotherapists have a sort of table, and if the table is sort of badly designed and collapses, then you have injuries. But the service is not the table, but the manual, so the massage. And then it's a act to in. And so basically the whole idea is that if in the course of providing services you get injured, so if we clean the floor and we do not put those yellow thingies, then that is not a wrongful act of the good yellow thingy, but that is that we, in providing educational services, are not protecting you enough for physical harm. Sort of side obligation of the primary obligation of services. Good question. Yes, 2 questions. Yes.
With 70%, do you mean in the amount of money that they produce?
Yeah.
Okay.
So there are various ways of identifying, let's say, the size of an economy, and one is by taking the gross domestic product. And if you look at the gross domestic product of the OECD countries, which is an organization of economic cooperation and development based in Paris, which is basically the rich country club, so the European, North America, Australia, Japan, these type of countries, their economies are for 70% filled with services. And so if you think of it, and 5% agriculture, and then what is it? 35% industrial production. So basically, the main thing we make our money with is hot air. Welcome in the 21st century. Yes, next question.
I didn't understand the effects of the services.
Yes, well, services can be right or wrong. So negative effects of services is that after medical treatment you're dead, or that the negative effects of bad telecommunication services is that you have to pay the bill, but there was no communication. So your subscription is deducting money every month from your bank account, but your telephone line is dead because there is sort of excuse like, well, this month we are changing the masts, or all kinds of other excuses. Or if in education your diploma seems to be invaluable, or if in transportation you are in the train and you do not reach your destination, and so forth. Yes? Let's look at how you then articulate these type of